So we just received the long-awaited sequel to Halo Infinite's multiplayer story, which, if you remember, followed events centered around the Spartans of the Avery J. Johnson Academy. This all sort of came as a surprise, because all narrative-driven DLC for Infinite was scrapped years ago, with no public plans on what would come of these characters, or the Academy location in general. But it would seem that they had more story to tell, as multiple cinematics were data mined from the game's files. These unfinished cinematics depicted the Lone Wolves, Commander Agrina, and our player character attempting to purge the Banished AI Iratus from the Academy's systems and stop him from detonating the core of a suit of Mjolnir, which would have destroyed the Academy. They were actually successful in stopping him, but only moments after, were told to stand down and prepare for Oni detention. But forget all of that, because with the new Last Stand update for Halo Infinite, things seem to have went a very different direction. With this new version of the story being given to us through 2 linear firefight maps, and the topic of today's video, the Waypoint Chronicle Battle for the Academy Part 1. But let's not waste any more time and just get right into it. Picking right up where the story left off, Spartan Hugh Din and our player are locked in a struggle with a Brocker device which has been inhabited by the Banished AI. Iritus, using the various arms and clamps which would normally assemble a suit of Mjolnir, restrains and attacks the 2 Spartans. And while he does this, he reveals that he has gained access to the Academy's records and closely guarded history and secrets of the Spartan programs. Din suggests that they need to separate the Mjolnir from its power core. Iritus then threatens to detonate it if they don't stand down, to which Din retorts that a blast like that would surely kill him as well. But Iritus quickly reminds him that he isn't simply restrained to a set of armor, as he then lights up every available screen and console in the room with the image of his holographic form. Realizing that this is just a distraction, and that denying the Banished AI a single suit of Mjolnir was not worth the deaths of 2 Spartans or the destruction of the Academy, Din and the player fall back to the elevator shaft. On the move, Din tries to make contact with Spartans Eklund and Commander Agrina, but has no luck as Iritus has taken full control of the Academy's local comms. Several minutes later, the team is all assembled in the Academy's AI lab, where cybersecurity technicians work frantically to slow down Iritus' takeover. And they're throwing zettabytes worth of junk data at him in hopes of making a difference, as he was bypassing Oni firewalls and gaining access to the entire archive with little to no issue. Eklund then takes note that our player is no longer in the room with the rest of the team, to which Din mentions having tasked us with gathering a team to go warn the other outposts. At this point, Agrina is becoming overwhelmed with the number of changing elements and the many decisions to make, of course many of which were logistical things that an artificial intelligence were designed to excel at, which has been a common realization in the past year following the created uprising. So as Iritus was gaining significant ground, it was time to accept the idea that Iritus would indeed gain full control and be able to call in banished reinforcements sooner than later. This left everyone silent for a moment until Agrina reoriented their holomap to reveal a hangar bay roughly a kilometer away. Here there were 4 Condor dropships and a single Zhang He-class courier, which, while an option, meant there was only a small handful of slipspace-capable ships on the entire planet. This was due to a massive recall of UNSC fleet assets to the Sol system back in December, which for anyone who may have read Halo Empty Throne would know was due to the Banished's assault on Earth. But due to Nysa and the Avery J. Johnson Academy being a closely guarded secret, they've always been off-grid and given the bare essentials. Din and another Spartan then pointed out that Nysa had become their home and that no Spartan would want to leave this fight. And Agrina didn't disagree, but protocol dictated that key personnel were to be evacuated regardless. Eklund then acknowledged who was on that list and motioned for Spartans Page and Ionescu to follow her, making their way to the vehicle depot. This meant their mission was now clear and Cole Protocol was officially declared. Agrina then reiterates to Din that they're not properly equipped to fight this battle on their own, but there might be something that they can do to avoid another Laconia Station scenario. We then cut to the inside of the Academy's data centers as Iritus is roaming freely amongst the data, and he is ecstatic to not be held prisoner, as he had been pretty much for the entirety of his existence so far. But for those who might not be familiar with his story, here's a quick refresher. Iritus is the first of his kind AI, originating from a Jirahane donor created by the artificial intelligence tech company Lux Voluspa. Following a cyber attack on their facility, his existence was revealed and Banished forces gained possession of his data matrix. Then, following the created uprising, he was employed as a custodian at the Banished shipbreaking facility on Camber. Sometime after that, Spartan 4's Sigrid Eklund and Hugh Din were deployed to this shipbreaking facility where they were able to capture Iritus by putting him inside of Din's neural interface, although this compromised both his armor and his cognitive functions. Eklund then commandeered a Phantom and was able to get the two back to the Avery J. Johnson Academy. Here, a series of digital simulations were used to trick the AI out of Din's neural interface, which trapped him in the Academy's systems. Academy personnel attempted to retrieve whatever banished data they could from his archives, but it would seem that this backfired and is the reason why he is now running rampant in the Academy's systems. But returning to the story, he is freely roaming the Academy's servers, finding that there are no amount of firewalls, buffers, or encryption elements that he couldn't smash through. And even though the cybersecurity team was working overtime, only a fraction of his runtime processes were actually dedicated to breaking down the junk data that they were throwing at him. But he was more than happy to let them think that they were making a difference. As he shifted through the volumes of classified files, mission reports, historical records, and the trove of other secret documents, he was drawn to the long history of trial and errors within the several Spartan programs. And while it would take time to digest everything and begin generating application models for ways he could use this information against the Spartans, he saw it as an undeniable prize for any one of the banished clans to claim. Because even though they would have to take on over 50 Spartans just to rescue his data matrix, the information he now held was priceless. And where the previous generations had indoctrinated children who were then rebuilt into nearly unquestioning super soldiers, the Spartan Fours were comprised of adult volunteers who had their own decorated careers, experience, beliefs, relationships, and loyalties. All things that can make an individual more susceptible to manipulation. And manipulation would be something he would need to use if he were truly going to control the Spartan, which seems to be of growing interest to him. Because despite what was demonstrated in the various simulations used to trap him, Iritus, or any AI really, cannot directly assume control of a Spartan's armor, as Mjolnir systems were specifically designed not to operate that way, and recent events like the Created Uprising have led to even more countermeasures for this. I'd also like to say that this is why in the cinematics we don't actually see him controlling Din's armor, or the armor that's being held up by the Brocker device. He really had more control over Din himself than anything, and in terms of the Brocker device, he was using the arms and clamps of the machinery to hold up the Mjolnir, using it more as a puppet for dramatic effect. And not to get too off track, but I will say that the idea of an empty suit of Mjolnir being presented as an enemy type has some insane implications. Like, I'm imagining Iritus just cobbling together various parts of Mjolnir armor to create these sort of drones that have all of the same strength and agility that the armor normally has. But they would operate probably more efficiently and even pose a bigger threat. I'm just saying, food for thought. While Iritus has gained firm control over the Academy, he just needs a little bit more time to infiltrate and interface with all of the other surrounding facilities. And as he waited, the next stage of his plan was already unfolding, as Commander Agrina and Spartan Din approached the Academy's deep space communication hub. Commander Agrina and Din passed through the entrance of the base, where they entered a control room filled with stacks of consoles and monitors displaying an array of readouts. Agrina then walked over to a console where she began to enter commands. This prompted the central monitor to reveal what was hidden within the rectangular structure next to the base, a magnetic accelerator. Or, according to Agrina, an ultra-precise low-mass launcher. This is explained to be experimental technology created about a decade ago for faster-than-light speed communications, only being used on planets like Reach and Earth before the problem of rogue AIs forced the UNSC to look into some old-school solutions. Agrina then determines that the personnel of Anvil Station are the only reinforcements that they can rely on, as she has no clue what the current status is of the other Spartan training facilities. And if you're not familiar with Anvil Station or the Cross-Species Anvil Task Force, last year I made a video going over everything you need to know about them, so be sure to check it out if you're interested in learning more. But what's important in this determination is that while the Spartan training facilities of Naxos, Virgo, and the recently destroyed Laconia Station used a Leonidas model AI to manage operations, there was no AI presence on Anvil Station. This was done to further encourage collaboration between the Sangheili and human crew members, but that fact alone makes Anvil one of the most trustworthy allies to not compromise the safety of the Spartans under her command. Agrina then attached a small black sphere housing to a wall-mounted container device which held her encoded distress call. The device then shuttled to the mass accelerator, and after a thunderous crack, the payload was sent into orbit. And after the console confirmed a successful slipspace transit, Agrina did the one thing that they say to never do in movies, and said, "I thought for certain that Iritus was going to do something to stop us here." And not missing a beat, as though the mere mention of his name prompted him to appear, all consoles then lit up with the hologram of Iritus, and he asked them to avert their attention outside, to which the Spartans looked out to the deep space relays, which were now mid-realignment. They then began pulsing with red lines of energy and transmitted a signal into deep space. Din then suggests that they get a sit rep from Eklund on the evacuation efforts, but Iritus tells him not to worry, as he has one last surprise for her that is coming very soon. We now switch to Spartan Sigrid Eklund's perspective as her and a convoy of Razorbacks arrive at the hangar bay. The hangar is described as approximately 400 meters in width, a hollowed-out space embedded in the bottom of a mountain, and having a pair of Marines posted on sentry duty. They were of course shocked to see her and the others, but only required the briefest of explanations on the situation before assisting in evacuation preparations. Say that 3 times fast. As Eklund loaded the Zhanghe-class courier with supply crates, she could tell that this vessel was long overdue for an extensive retrofit. Most notably, the slipspace drive was an old Series 2 model, meaning it was reliable, but incredibly slow. It would roughly take 2 weeks to get to a feasible rendezvous point, and the ship would need to be loaded with more supplies than normal, as there weren't enough cryogenic chambers to support even half of the Academy personnel present in the hangar at this moment. But on the topic of seats going off-world for the Academy personnel, the sobering realization was setting in that there were going to have to be soldiers who would need to stay behind. As they approached, having nearly loaded 80% of their inventory, one of the Marines turned their attention to the horizon, seeing movement in the distance. Eklund then grabbed her helmet and stepped out of the hangar. Her visor then magnified the objects and revealed a total of 9 surface-to-air missiles headed directly for their location. With breakneck speed, Agrina and Din begin to race against the missiles overhead. Agrina then calls for Din to try and establish communications with the crew at the hangar, but is having no luck, so he shifts to the turret of the Warthog. He tries to line up a shot with the missiles, but realizes that there's no way he could possibly hope to have a shot connect. His visor then tracks the trajectory and velocity of the missiles, displaying a countdown of 16 seconds before impact. Agrina pushes the Warthog to its max speed of just under 80 miles per hour, but there was no way that they were going to make it in time. And just as Din thought that he saw movement within the hangar, and was trying to make out any more detail, the missiles collided, the first of them striking the courier. The shockwave from the blast threw their Warthog off course and caused Agrina to slam the brakes. Then a thunderous blast shook the world around them, and a series of explosions cascaded up the mountain. Rocks then crashed down onto the burning wreckage of the ships that once were, and their only escape from Nysa was now destroyed. As the 2 Spartans disembarked from their Warthog and walked up to the destruction, a sudden click within Din's helmet confirmed that communications had been restored, revealing dozens of local transmissions, the first of which informing Agrina that Iritus was not done, and that he had just marked the Academy itself as his next target. Her first thought was that this could have been a bluff, as his data chip was still inside the Academy, but then again, the sacrifice of a single AI to take out over 50 Spartans would certainly be a worthwhile trade. But by restoring their communications, it was clear to her that Iritus had wanted them to make a choice. Either use whatever firepower they still had to destroy their own artillery, or lose the Academy, their central base of operations with everything in it: weapons, ammunition, a strong defensible position, and the over 100 personnel still inside. While sacrificing their artillery would significantly hinder their ability to hold off a banished invasion, it was clear that too many lives and resources would be lost. Agrina then made up her mind, and mobilized all available air support to target their artillery sites. And in less than a minute, 11 Pelicans were in the air, with them forming pairs that were en route to those sites, save 1 Pelican. This Pelican then touched down with a team of Marines, led by a Spartan wearing specialized combat medic armor and foldable stretchers attached to his back. Those still standing then worked to recover anyone they could find in the rubble, with Din working for almost 20 minutes before he caught the glimpse of a familiar blue visor. Pinned down by a slab of concrete and a nest of twisted rebar, Din rushed to her and began to try and lift the debris. This overexertion caused his armor's reactive circuits to strain, but he was able to heave it off to her side. And after helping her to her feet, Eklund asked if their survival had meant they'd won, to which Din replied, "Not yet, but we're going to." So with no means of escaping the planet, this meant that every moment between now and when the Banished arrived would need to be spent preparing. The only question that remained was whether or not the first visitors to the planet would be the Banished or the reinforcements from Anvil Station. Either way, Nysa would be the place that the members of the Avery J. Johnson Academy would repel their enemies or make their last stand. We then fast forward to March 3rd, 2560, as the banished vessel Ghost of Kolo has emerged from slipspace above Nysa. The human, Kigyar, and Jiralhane crew members then begin working their consoles, which were lighting up with sensor readings, planetary data, and alerts. They were eager to prove their might and prowess in the fight to come. However, before they can proceed, they needed a proper speech to motivate them. And that's when the banished Spartan, Bloodstar Ilsa Zane, takes to the shipwide channel to begin rallying her crew. A fellow chieftain then begins thumping the pommel of his gravity hammer on the floor, prompting the crew to begin stamping their feet in unison. Her speech grows more intense as she declares their mission would be to take all hope from their enemy. Zane then calls on them to not only break the enemy's defenses, but also break their spirits. Now the stamping and clanging is growing louder, culminating into a fervent chant of "From fire to blood," echoing the new Colonial Alliance slogan. Zane then raises her mutilator shotgun, locking its firing mechanism, and concludes with the Banished rallying cry of "For the Banished." Now that is where the story ends for Part 1 of Battle for the Academy, but we're surely in for some interesting developments once Part 2 drops. Hopefully we'll get to see the return of some Anvil characters who were introduced in last year's Anvil Accord Waypoint Chronicle, and hopefully with that, a full-on battle between the combined forces of Anvil and the Academy's personnel against the Banished. It's also important to note that not only will we be getting an appearance from Ilsa Zane, but also the fan favorite June A266. And the only reason I bring attention to this is because he's actually in the artwork for this chronicle, and he's wearing a full suit of Mjolnir. Now, this could be just due to the fact that they don't have a model for him in Halo Infinite, but it could also mean that he's going to be directly involved with the planet's evacuation, leading Spartan reinforcements, or even facing off against Ilsa Zane himself. But hey, we'll just have to see what's to come. And as always, if you liked the video, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you're new. I'm currently creeping up on 5,000 subscribers, and I'd really appreciate it if you guys could help me hit that milestone. But that's all for this video. Stay tuned for Part 2, and I'll see you in the next video.